We are honored to have somebody with your academic credentials. It's a rarity amongst my friend group for sure.
But I'm not just a pointy head, right?
Exactly. Yeah, there you go. So now everybody, welcome to Tech Sales Insights. Really excited to have Jim Karrh here with us. We have a great title topic, which is how to build consistently effective sales conversations. I got to be able to say it first. How to build consistently effective sales communications and conversations. And we're sponsored by Humantech, who is the personality AI sponsor of Sales Community. So for those that might be old enough to remember the old disc profiles, it's basically that on steroids. Looks through your kind of social media and online content to be able to kind of basically assess you. And they also have some cool tools around being able to assess people that you're maybe partnering with, you're working with, working for you, that you're working for. So it gives you an idea kind of how to communicate and how to handle them. And also have a cool AI tool that allows you to customize emails to their liking. So as an example, if you're going to send something to me, it should be short and sweet, not too long. Other people prefer longer and in-depth type notes, and kind of has the AI to leverage that. So really cool there. And Tucker, maybe you can throw up, there's a link that we have, I think, for a free sign up if anybody wants to give it a go as a trial. So as I said, Jim is an academic. He is actually a clinical professor. I don't know if I've met clinical professors before at University of Alabama. Roll Tide. We got it, I guess, right there. Yeah. And really focused in the sales and marketing area. And then aside from the teaching aspect, also does a lot of consulting and advising as well that we will be talking about. For those that are members of Sales Community, thanks. For those that are not, Tucker has a free link up here, salescommunity.com/springfree. So lots of great content and great folks that are involved with that. Obviously teaching at University of Alabama. Jim lives in Tuscaloosa, awesome place if you have not been there. And full disclosure, we only recently met. I spoke at a sales class there a year or so ago, and Jim and a bunch of professors were kind of at lunch, and Jim and I hit it off and was definitely impressed with kind of what he's doing and how he's doing it. As we know, within the college community, sales you would think should be everywhere, and Alabama has an excellent sales program and sends a lot of the students into for sure well qualified great positions there also. So definitely impressed with Jim. So thanks for joining us, Jim.
It is my pleasure, and for everyone who's tuning in at the time, you'll know how popular this whole thing is that Randy has, because when we talked at lunch that day and he mentioned this, I have a podcast myself, and so Randy said, yeah, we'd love to have you on. I'll send you something and we'll get you booked. And it was at least a year in advance to line up here for the long drum roll. I'm really happy to be here. This is a vibrant, growing community that you have managed to nurture here, Randy.
Stephanic. And we had, I think, with us also Ken Doherty, Derek Twombly, and then somebody else I can picture, Jay Stephanic, I think, was also there with us at the
yes.
So great.
That's right.
And thanks for the shout. We're actually booked weekly 7 years out, and I just stopped booking beginning.
It sounds like master's tickets, Randy. I mean, we don't even have a waiting list anymore.
It gets ridiculous there. But anyway, so some other kind of bio highlights for Jim. Consultant to B2B sales organizations across industries, really focused in companies that on the sales side have long, complicated sales cycles and I'll say costly solutions, certainly value-based. Author of a great book, The Science of Customer Connections, Manage Your Message to Grow Your Business, something very important for sure. Former CMO, so he has a great perspective on sales and marketing alignment that we'll talk about, and certainly is teaching sales management, managing innovation, and marketing principles at University of Alabama. So jumping into the questions here, won't hold it against you, but you were a Gator, went to University of Florida undergrad.
And married one, basically, too. So, yeah, double Gator in the household.
To do is this thing here. There you go. So what was your kind of first job out of college?
Well, and I had two different stints at Florida, but basically I went from undergraduate. I worked in some family things for a little while, and then I went to, and I know it's over your shoulder, is a Duke pennant. So, yeah, there you go. The Fuqua School of Business, Duke University, and to get my MBA there. So really, first big boy job was coming out of Duke, and I was a junior banker of all things. I had an offer to work as an associate for what was then Bankers Trust Company, which later imploded, became part of Deutsche Bank, and gave it a couple of years there on Park Avenue in Manhattan just to see what that was like. And it was really interesting experience, but not one that I wanted to make a career out of.
Awesome. So maybe go through your impressive career from there, including getting a PhD at Florida.
Yes, so I had a small business, as I say, an unfortunately small business for a little while, and then sold that and was deciding what to do next. And I remembered those business school professors and thought, that's a really cool job. You know, you can work at something that you like, you get to teach. Most all of them did some outside work, and I thought, well, let's give that a shot. So I went back to Florida, met my future wife there. So that was the best outcome, and then started a teaching career, and which eventually took me to Arkansas. And shortly after I made tenure, I got an offer from a consulting client to run marketing for his private business. He had a couple of businesses and was adding a third, needed to bring all those together. And he challenged me to get a real job and to come and join that team that was putting those things together. And so did that for a bit. And when that run was up, is when I began to venture into more of what I'm doing today, which is a lot of work with B2B selling teams, as we can talk about as well. So I was an associate with a niche consultancy that did playbooks and coaching and leadership programs and training for B2B sales teams, and started doing some work on my own as well. 3 years ago, Randy, right before we met, I had an offer to go back on campus and join faculty of the Culver House College of Business at the University of Alabama, where I could teach and still do some outside things as well. So it's been really cool at this point where I can hopefully not wear the students out with too many war stories from the field, stay fresh with what's going on today, but also be able to continue to learn from students, learn from clients, and teach at a lot of different levels today.
Awesome. So great. Roll Tide for sure, right?
Roll Tide, go Gators, go Devils, you name it.
Oh, no Gators.
Not much of a Georgia Bulldog fan, though, I have to say. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all good. So with the consulting that you do, are there kind of nuances or differences within the kind of different industries, or would you say, hey, kind of sales is sales mostly?
There are definitely some nuances, but part of learning something about any domain, whether it's just the intricacies of sales or learning your business, is to pick up the patterns. And as we can talk about today and involve your community, a lot of my work, and much of this is based on all the way back to my doctoral work, to the serving time as a CMO, and then taking that into the sales world, is focusing a lot on message delivery, what audiences respond to and what they don't, and what tends to differentiate you. In other words, what's resonant. And so a lot of the patterns that I see, to your question specifically, is I like helping clients and teams to think very strategically about not just messaging, big picture messaging, that's a big term, but on the most important selling conversations that they have with their ideal clients, with the people, the personas, the buyer groups, the influencers within those accounts and those targets over the course of a long selling process. I think that's where a lot of the goodness comes from and focus. And one of the structures that I think through the lifeblood, and if you want to think through a selling process, or really how buyers make decisions in groups when they have these confusing offerings to evaluate, is there's a sequence. And here's the common pattern, and then I think some of the distinctives within different industries and different domains. The sequence is common. So your buyers, your prospects, first, if they really have some interest in what you're doing, the first part is a change conversation. Why should they even consider change? Whether there's a new technology, a new competitor, they haven't gotten the results that they wanted. Something is changing in their world, and you as a selling professional or as a team need to help figure out what is it that's changing and how you can help. That's the first part, is the change element of the conversation. Then there's an urgency part of it. So listen, you can have 20 good ideas, but your buyers are going to say, hey, Jim, we can only handle 3, 4, maybe 5 priorities at a time. Why should your solution, why should your idea take precedent over other things that we could be doing? And then finally, toward the end, there's more of a differentiation conversation. Like, why should we pick your solution over a competitor, or a class of competitors, or just do it ourselves? And that's, I think, Randy and everyone, where the nuances come in. So I think to have business acumen, to be a good guide, to be trustworthy and a really good salesperson, is you need to understand enough about change and developing a sense of urgency. But then whether you're in medical devices or software or cybersecurity or all the other areas that could involve high-tech sales, that differentiation piece comes in. But what I find, and we can dive into this a little bit more as well, where I see professionals and teams go wrong is they get out of sequence. They want to dive so much into the differentiation piece that they haven't necessarily made the case for change, connected the dots well enough, or developed a sense of urgency and priority with their prospects. And so we can talk about that as well. Long answer, but I think the basic elements of really effective selling conversations follow a common sequence, but there are definitely some nuances and differences in different industries and competitive situations.
Absolutely. So if we bring it kind of back up a bit, when you were, just to make sure we kind of level set, when you talk about kind of messaging in general, kind of how are you defining what messaging is?
Excellent point. Don't let me jump too far ahead too fast, because messaging means a lot to different people. And if you ask the product experts and the marketing team and the sellers, they'll all come up with different things. So I don't think mission statement, I don't think slogans or a lot of marketing content or even product information. For me, what I find is most effective area of focus when it comes to high-tech sales teams is think at the conversational level, and whether that conversation is happening virtually or in person, that's where you really want to be. It's the dialogue that comes in, whether you consider yourself in a discovery phase or you're trying to move more toward prioritization and running a demo and closing and the other elements along the way. So think conversation could be one-to-one, one-to-several, several-to-several, that hit key elements of the buyer's decision-making process.
Gotcha. And then if you think about it, sales cycle, you could debate the frameworks or methodology, but kind of starts with, say a cold call or qualification, kind of ends with an order, and then hopefully, follow on. But kind of there's different phases of messaging and conversations that are really happening throughout, correct?
Absolutely correct. And so sometimes you can think about it as fundamentally as, are we having conversations with the right people at the right time? So then that'll back up a little bit to on the qualification piece. Have we defined an ideal client, an ideal customer in the appropriate way? Do we have the right way that we're developing leads and qualifying them and getting them into the right settings and working on from there? But absolutely, I think that's a good point. Think of it as the conversational pieces when you're going, again, through discovery, when you're going through demos and all the other elements, whether you have a 5-step cycle or a 7-step cycle, it doesn't really matter.
Gotcha. All right. And then how much of a problem do you see messaging being these days?
I think it's a mess. And it shows up in different ways that we can talk about too. Now, granted, that's what I focus on, but it's a bit anecdotal, but I see the pattern over and over. And I got a bit of a data point a couple of years ago from a fellow named Tim Pollard, and he had a group of sellers, and they're all in a similar kind of situation to a lot of the folks listening in or viewing right now. They're all good people, experienced people. They were coming together for a meeting, and good products, good companies, et cetera. We asked them a couple of questions, and it had to do with confidence. And he asked a question: how confident are you in the value of what you're selling on a 1 to 10 scale? On average, the answer was greater than 8. What we sell isn't perfect, but it works well for the right buyers. And
Right. Good.
Confidence in the messaging behind what you sell was less than 4. So it meant that the salespeople, and you can dive deeper, like, well, maybe marketing's not providing what we need, or we're not positioned appropriately in the marketplace, or I haven't been trained on it. There are lots of different elements that could go into this. But listen, Randy and everyone, if you have a lot of confidence in the value of what you offer, but you aren't sure how to talk about it, that's a big problem. And I find at least 2 really important implications for what happens to human beings out there in the field if they lack confidence in how to talk about their business. Neither of those implications is very good. The first is they'll avoid the conversation. If I'm not sure of what to say and I don't want to look like an idiot, get asked a question that I don't know the answer to, then I'm going to avoid it. I'm going to avoid having the business review. I'm going to avoid doing the outbound work. Right. And that doesn't help your pipeline. But the other thing that can happen is if you lack confidence in how to talk about your offering or how to talk about your business, you'll fall into something that's really familiar that you do know about, which is typically ourselves and our stuff. So that's when we wind up talking about ourselves too often, not about the prospects or the customer's business. Right. And we get into a feature function type of conversation, which, as we know, isn't that interesting to potential buyers. So that's fundamentally what we need to solve for is do sellers, do teams, do organizations have confidence in some fluidity and consistency in how they talk about what they sell. In the absence of it, the crickets are going to be chirping. They're not going to be having the conversations that they need to have. Or if they do have them, it's not going to be particularly interesting to buyers. That doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can tell I get a little bit worked up over this, Randy. So
totally good. Yeah, and it's funny. I'll do kind of Zooms with clients, and we'll do, I call it kind of speed dating. Okay, you got 15 minutes to basically qualify positions, see if there's next steps. Typically, kind of these are with CROs, execs they couldn't otherwise get to. They spend 5 minutes talking about themselves, like, who cares? No offense, like, who cares? If you're going out to lunch or dinner, drinks, okay, maybe fine. But you got 15 minutes. Just focus on what is that messaging? What is that conversation? How are you going kind of quickly through a sales cycle to see if there's interest in a follow-up?
That's exactly right. And so, hey, listen, it's not that your expertise and your background might not come into play later on, but again, just form the relationship first. And so I think what you experience in those comes from, again, it's a fundamental lack of preparation, confidence, skill development in terms of talking about the business. And that certainly hurts an individual's performance, but it really undercuts consistency and it really undercuts effectiveness across a team.
Yeah, amazing. And I should say here too, so people watching along or listening, feel free to chime in with any questions or any comments. We got Tucker behind the scenes, as always. So Tucker, thanks for your help there. And it also seems kind of on this whole kind of messaging conversation. I mean, back in the day, you'd kind of have a scripted, for lack of a better word, scripted, okay, questions, here's how you qualify, ask, and then you have kind of a talk track kind of around that. And then, to your point before, in terms of just, old school preparation, it just seems like a lot of people are just, kind of trying to wing it as opposed to really being, I don't want to say coin operated, but kind of coin operated in a humanistic way.
I agree, Randy. I see that sometimes, and sometimes it's overconfidence in winging it, but that doesn't work most of the time. And so, if you're in it, how often does it happen? Not just in professional conversations, but all the time. Hey, listen, I'm getting to a point where I forget stuff all the time. But how often do we think of, I wish I'd told that story, or there was a question to ask, or I didn't think of something 5 minutes after it would have been really helpful. in a conversation. You get off a Zoom meeting or you get out of an in-person meeting. We could have done that a little bit differently. And so a lot of the work here, much of what I talk about and what I learn from clients and what I teach and train to, frankly, it's not that original. I mean, it's some pretty foundational kinds of things. Sometimes we integrate that with more modern tools, but building consistency and focus and effectiveness. Randy, I love your posts about I may be old school, and I think
it's all basics. It's stuff we would do in our sleep 20, 30 years ago. And it's like, now all of a sudden it's like this lost art. It's like, oh my God, it's such a great idea. I'm like, what, are you kidding me? This is like basic.
So the part that can come over time, if you can get those basic parts right and codify them, and whether you want to, we can talk about this as well. How do you use tools? You train AI, you build playbooks and guides for your team, you get training and reinforcement systems so that these things, so the preparation becomes easier. People become more fluid and more confident in it as they go along. And so now after all these years, I mean, I can pretty much recognize if I'm in a change conversation or if I'm in an urgency conversation or if I'm in a differentiation conversation or some mix there. But that comes from some discipline about and understanding those foundational pieces, right, and understanding the common structures that can lead to success.
Yeah, amazing. So we I digressed you a little bit there, but we're talking about some of the symptoms for the different type of messaging problems. You touched on crickets. So I know you also have two other good ones, commodities and cowboys. So tell us about commodities.
And this is my attempt with the book and what I talk about. You make things a little alliteration, put things into some easy categories where people can relate to it. Again, nothing that's that original, but maybe a simple structure can help people with it. So the fundamental premise, and we can break this down as well. We talk about how do you create consistently effective sales conversations over time and across a team. And I find that there are three elements to those, which we can break down as well. There's the message itself, is what you actually say and ask and do in those conversations. There's the messengers, so the human beings, all the way from your sales team to your SMEs to your current customers to other people like that you hope can carry that message for you. And how do you feed that process? And then finally, there's the management habits. So how do you train to it? How do you coach to things? How do you reinforce that message and refresh that on a regular cadence that's going to work for your team? So the absence of those things, to a degree, I think, are what you just mentioned, and I have those as the symptoms where you might have a weakness in your overall sales messaging. So crickets, commodities, and cowboys. Commodity is the messaging piece. So you sound like everybody else you're competing against. And that's really easy to do in a particular industry. Like we can easily get put into industry lingo and acronyms and stuff like that. So if you're a civil engineer, you probably talk like other civil engineers. If you're in cybersecurity, you talk about those sorts of things. That's good to a point. And yet in a complex selling environment, you're going to be talking to non-technical buyers and prospects, people who need someone who's on the finance side or the risk management side or the training and HR side or whatever. So you can't talk industry language. You can't talk feature and performance language. So there's that one piece, is you can commoditize yourself without intending to, but we have to get the right language that everybody can relate to and understand. Crickets is a messenger problem. And so I look at that. I grew up in a little town in South Georgia. Not very much happened. You get into these long summer afternoons and evenings, you can hear the crickets chirping, right? And so you get that. In a selling environment, the crickets are chirping because your pipeline's not too healthy, right? You don't have enough opportunities coming in. And I find that can be, you have a few salespeople who really get it. They're high performers and they're churning it out, but others are struggling, right? It might be some variation of the 80-20 piece. Or oftentimes in growth companies, you have the founder or the boss, the subject matter expert, the smart person who we really want to get prospects in front of that person, but there's only one of that person. So what you really want to do is have enough people who can share that message. They may not have the depth of knowledge of everybody else, but there's a shared set. We've got a big set of well-equipped, competent messengers across the team. The final part is cowboys. And that's the cowboy mentality, Randy. And there's a part of that we really like. Someone's going to say, look, I've got this. I know how to do it. Don't script it out for me. Don't tell me what to do. I'm hitting it. I'm President's Club. I'm whatever that might be. And they're not wrong, but you can't scale that, right? So if everyone's doing things their own way, if everyone's being a cowboy or a cowgirl, then you can't have that sense of consistency. And so how do we build in, whether it be for training, reinforcement, coaching, those sorts of things? And so the symptoms can show up in different ways. Commoditization is your win rates, your margins, things like that. You're getting commoditized down where your value's not coming through. So you may see those elements on your dashboard. For the crickets, again, it may be just lack of new qualified opportunities that are there because you got these stretch points in here in your pipeline. And for the Cowboys part, is a lack of consistency. And that can be lack of consistency within your team or across teams or across regions or even sales to marketing to product to corporate messaging. That's a coordination issue that we need to work on as well. It's a long piece, but those things should fit together if you're taking a look at the whole issue of how am I going to make sure that sales messaging is actually working for sales and has some of these elements. Some parts may be stronger for you than others at this moment.
Totally. And then I'm not sure your perspective on kind of value selling or the value messaging is part of it, but I always like to say if you're in the elevator and you're with the CFO, who's typically the hardest person to sell to, what are you going to say? If they're a current customer, you're trying to sell to them, in terms of, kind of what do you provide? And my belief is it should be around what are you doing to help them generate revenue, to get cost savings. Maybe it's a competitive advantage, maybe it's security and they stay out of jail, but it's not the widgets, it's not the speeds and feeds. Like, what are you going to do from a business perspective? And those companies and the sales teams that can message that accordingly, succinctly, with the recommender, decision maker bought in, to me is a holy grail. What's your perspective?
Couldn't agree with you more. And if you find yourself it involves doing enough homework and research and preparation, and that being shared across a team. So if you're really good at what you do, then if you find that there's a CMO that's in the elevator, you have a sense of what that person is dealing with and where the risks are to them. And like you say, for a CFO, now the obvious one, I want to cut costs, but CFOs are very strategically involved in the business. What we find is, I guess it may still be the case, Randy, that the most common path to CEO is from CFO. And that's been the case for a while. So the strategic growth plans of the business, as well as cost control and especially risk management, compliance, reporting, those sorts of things. Right. So a switch should go off at that point. And we know the value of what we do applied to that person should be something that everyone's pretty fluid with, even if they don't. You might be a financial expert, but understanding how what you offer is valuable to those different nuances to different players in the buying process.
Yeah, absolutely. So how should sellers attack this problem?
Well, I'd say, first of all, let's just recognize that it could be an issue. Now, again, those elements of messengers, and management habits, if it's a three-legged stool, or you want to think about the Venn diagram with the overlaps, I mean, you could be pretty strong in some areas, but may have one weakness. I would look at this, first of all, and see from what's on the dashboard, the deals and the opportunities as they move through, and if they're moving through, and at what pace and at what margin, and who's touching these sorts of things. Where do we seem to be strong? Where do we have problems that we need to address? I also find that, as we were talking before, Randy, about messaging and what it really means, especially in terms of sales effectiveness and revenue generation, I think focus is really important, because we can get into like, well, what's marketing doing? What's product team doing? What's sales team doing? What's enablement doing? what gets everybody on the same page, could be literally or figuratively, is a focus on what are the key conversations. And I will oftentimes speak with people who just kind of want to even talk through this and say, where do you think we might want to focus? And at a very high level is, okay, for your revenue plans for this year and on into next year, is the emphasis on net new business? Is the emphasis on upsell, cross-sell? Do you have new products that are coming in as additions to your portfolio or substitutions into your portfolio? So let's think through where you want the money to come from, and then what are the conversations that will that those revenue plans depend upon. So if you're looking, again, net new business, all right, what's that outbound prospecting look like, and who are your ideal clients, and who are you trying to get engaged in those conversations? By doing that, that brings sales and marketing and maybe product and maybe other areas together. They all have to focus on a single problem. I say typically one key conversation, maybe two, and that forces them to work together and have similar definitions, similar kinds of goals, similar kinds of timelines, and that tends to work the best. So again, maybe we've got I'll give you an example that I talk about sometimes. This was a company that was and is in the materials handling business. And they started for a long time, it was equipment sales, forklifts and swing reaches and rack systems and things that go into warehouses. They are one of a few big players in that space, and business was pretty good. But as has been the case in a lot of industries involving manufacturing, the products themselves, the margins were going down and down and down and down. The services around those products were becoming a more important source of revenue and margin. But as the solutions that this company was selling became more and more complex and expensive and involved, what they found is that the person who could buy from them in the past, a warehouse manager, no longer had the budget authority to do it. It involved too many things. It involved risk management, it involved finance, it involved HR, it involved compliance. And so they were a little bit stuck. So we have to have a new conversation. And interestingly enough, you brought up CFO. They said that we don't know how to talk to that person, but we're getting hung up in our deals now because we need to translate what we do. So we created a playbook together about how do you get to, it was really a finance and risk-oriented buyer in that process, and how do we translate what we do? We didn't change the product, we didn't change anything like that, but we changed how the team talked about it. And so the reticence at the very beginning, as we talked about lack of confidence, I had one of the very good young sellers in this company say to me, Jim, I've got really good relationships with the warehouse manager, and they can get me a meeting with a CFO or a VP who's on compliance and risk management. But if I mess that up, not only do I lose the deal, but I've damaged the relationship with my primary contact there, the warehouse manager. So I need to know what to do, and the other people here need to know what to do. Right. So that involved getting the Tiger team together from marketing, product, risk, and sales, high performers in sales, and then let's craft those conversations, reverse engineer it for the buyer who's a little bit new to us. And they wound up building this 4 percentage points market share within the next 12 or so months following doing that. But it took that sort of a focused effort. It's not like we got to make something up, but let's get our brains around how that buyer processes what we do, and then get everyone talking about it consistently.
Gotcha. And then is that typically what I'll call an old school kind of playbook then that says, okay, in your case of then going from the warehouse manager to the CFO, kind of here's what the conversation and messaging kind of talk track is going to be. And here's, again, I call it a playbook, kind of what to do and how to do it.
That's it. And so in playbooks, some people call it guides, whatever you want to call it. I still call it playbook a lot because I think it's familiar. Every playbook's going to be a little bit different. So sometimes we're trying to tell an enterprise story better. Sometimes we're trying to get to a new product offering. And it was really a new conversation with a different persona, a different buyer persona. And so as you might suspect, it had some common elements of targeting. What is this person's objectives and challenges? What are the questions to ask? What are the relevant examples and stories to share? What are their likely objections going to be? We put together a brief visual story using language of a portfolio. So thinking of a portfolio of assets and how you would piece those things together from a financial point of view, and not just consider individual point solutions in isolation. And that tended to resonate. So yeah, it's what do you say and show and do and ask, and how do you follow up in that particular type of conversation? You just lay it out for people. And again, as to your point earlier, Randy, not a script, because who wants a script? Especially your best people will legitimately say, don't give me a script. But a guide, talk tracks, suggestions, the good collective thinking from the highest performers inside the company. And that's what tends to work the best.
And then is it typically from a kind of change management perspective? I would imagine most of the top performers are like sponges, and a lot of the bottom performers kind of are not.
It's an interesting tension, Randy, and you're correct. What I find, and you probably find it within people in this community, a lot of the smartest people are also the best learners. They're humble. They like finding out new things and learning how other people are approaching common problems. Now, if you're a sales leader and you're thinking of this sort of initiative, sometimes there's also pushback. So your highest performers are going to tend to be the busiest or feel the busiest. But I rarely find that to be a problem, because we're wanting them to take an active role in contributing to the playbook. But if they see real value from it for themselves and for the team as well, it's typically not a problem to volunteer them for that sort of effort. But yeah, you would think that's like, oh, I'll never be able to get my star performers to be in a project like this. Not necessarily, because I think the characteristics of your top performers is they actually do want to learn and they do want to help, as long as they know it's relevant and you won't waste their time.
Yeah, I mean, I always found people would say, oh, we have this problem or that problem. And I'd say, great, let's get a handful of the best people together, do it. And a lot of times leadership will say, oh, they're not going to want to do it. I'm like, they love doing it because they want to help. They want to contribute. They've got egos. They want to show that they're, leaders, even though they may just be individual contributors. And so much goodness I find can come out of that. All right. We got some action here. So Justin says, thanks for putting on the show with Jim and all the other work you do, Randy. Appreciate it. And then Justin also chimes in. I call these types of people, Jim is talking about, students of the game. Absolutely.
Well put.
It's like any athlete or anybody else. I mean, just got to be always learning, which again is, I don't know if it's a generational thing these days, but crazy. And then Neeraj Singh says, Jim, great points about adjusting your messaging for different ICPs while multi-threading and understanding their motivations. Also, how do you ensure that this approach remains authentic and doesn't come across as too salesy, or I think as we're talking about before, kind of how do you make sure it doesn't come across too scripted?
Well, Neeraj, yeah, great point. And so, and we can talk about some tools as well. I think areas like AI can be helpful, but they can also be, they can produce salesy types of things that are not personalized and come across as a little cheesy if not used well. I find that for, again, high performers, and if you want consistently trustworthy people across your sales team, you want to personalize things, but avoid the things like, I know exactly what you need. I know exactly, we deal with people who are exactly like you. Most of us who are professionals, if someone tells us they know exactly what we're thinking or exactly what we need, well, at least for me, my natural one is, how would you know exactly what I'm thinking or exactly what I need? I'll push back. Now, I might lean in a little bit if you can say, it's a situation, it may not be exactly like yours, but I was working with someone who had a similar type of challenge. There was a similar pressure. This is what they were seeing in their business. And what we found was this was some underlying cause or something that you get the idea. So I think it's an opportunity for you to test a pattern, test an assumption, ask a good question and show your smarts and your genuine interest in them, most people, most professionals, even busy professionals on the buy side will react very well to that. And they'll react to you. They'll ascribe to you that you're a very smart person. And by the way, we also find, going way back to research with audience members and communication, what we find, Randy, this may seem a little bit contradictory too, but people who talk less in conversation are judged as being very good conversationalists.
So and very smart.
And very smart. That's right.
That's why God gave us 2 ears and one mouth, right?
That's right.
So again, for Justin Neeraj, thank you so much. For other people want to chime into questions or comments, feel free. So now it's really a lot of, obviously, depending upon the size of the company, but I always view kind of first line managers are really the ones that run the go-to-market engine. So first line sales managers. So any kind of tips or tricks that you found there to make sure that they're kind of embracing the change on the one hand, but then also kind of coaching and inspecting what we're expecting with this?
Yes. And this is some ideas that come from having worked with a lot of frontline sales managers and also seeing some current research about who performs well in those frontline sales manager positions. It's not always what you might think. What we're finding is that across industries, that those who have the track record of being high performers as salespeople most easily get offered sales manager roles, but they tend to perform less well. It's a kind of a strange thing, but high performance as an individual sales rep does not predict high performance as a sales manager. So I think it's a different skill set. Most managers that I've seen, even in really good teams or really good companies, haven't been coached well themselves. And oftentimes early in a career, they're going to get pushed into a managerial role, or there's a lot of turnover on the team and they're stepping in to do that. And so that's a challenge. So your question about that is, how can we help them, and what can we do to feed that system? We spend some time, we're going to create a playbook and maybe reverse engineer some great messaging and some great habits and launch some things, but it's just going to die on the vine 30, 60, 90 days out if it's not being coached to and reinforced by those frontline managers. And so we need to understand, first of all, they got a very difficult job. We need to make sure that we put coaching as both a priority where we're enabling those managers, but also don't make it hard for them. So we will do a lot of coaching, role plays, reinforcement within the context of regularly scheduled sales meetings or things that they do. So we're not trying to add more time and just make the processes really simple. There are a lot of tools where we can use to, and I think we're familiar with a lot of these technologies, to review calls and to review meetings and the like that can really condense what's going on there, so we don't have to waste a ton of time in review. But we, in general, what I find, Randy, you may have seen something kind of similar. We don't need managers managing to the forecast. We don't need them managing to the dashboard. What we're seeing, what we need them to do is to help coach to the behaviors that we know will lead to the results that we want. And listening to your reps and helping to move their behavior, because it's change management within the team as well. I know I've spoken some generalities there, but
yeah, totally great. I was thinking on I'll say the conversational intelligence or call recording that Gong and others have, kind of leveraging AI. So a lot of times the managers can't be on if they've got 5 or 10 reps, right? They can't be on every call all the time, but kind of leveraging some of that intelligence with the AI spun in there is got to be invaluable. So if you think about your whole conversational messaging topic, now versus like 5 years ago, what you're able to do to leverage this technology just is huge from the coaching and inspection side, I would think.
And we can match that if we have a well-defined playbook or guide with those sorts of talk tracks. So if we're looking for our people to ask better questions and specific types of questions during their conversations, and we've got these tools to be able to assess, are they doing that? we also want to be able to match it to what we've set out is this is our current best practice, which is what we recommend through the playbook.
Right.
And again, that saves managers time, and it also builds consistency across the teams.
Yeah. So awesome. So another question I'd like to ask everybody is, if you think about kind of CRO or CEO leaders you've worked with, any particular that you'd give a shout out to?
One that I have clearance to talk about, worked a guy named Paul Breitenbach. Paul was the CMO of Priceline.com way back in the day, and but he now is CEO of a company that works in the AI space called R4, and did some work with Paul and his team. What struck me about him is Paul is a lot smarter than I, by far, but he's also, as one of your community members said a moment ago, a student of the game. And was very willing and thinking through. They have something that's really complex that they know really works, but how can they restructure how they talk about it to people who don't know the technology, and would be in conversations. And you're trying to explain something to people, and people are nodding their head, but they're basically inside there, I have no clue what this person's talking about, but I don't want to seem like an idiot. So Paul's a good example of someone who's, as what was the line from Good Will Hunting, wicked smart, but also always looking for places to learn. And he's doing that as running a company himself these days.
Awesome. So great. And we have from a LinkedIn user, Jim, great point about managers coaching the behaviors as well as the best salesperson is not necessarily the best sales manager. By the way, I see that very apparent in the financial services world side of things, where they take individual producers and are train wrecks for managers. But anyway, any thoughts on teaching coaching fundamentals to sales managers? And I'll just chime in here. So I do a lot of work with Sandler and Octus IQ, and this is just such a huge problem or opportunity, right? You have, during COVID, people were trying to retain people. More times than not, they would be promoted kind of more as a retention vehicle, not because of a skill set thing. They didn't have the wherewithal to do the training or the coaching or developing of these first line managers, which is just, I think, one of several things that's a huge, huge void these days. But any thoughts that you have around the kind of coaching fundamentals to these sales managers?
Sure. And great point. So thank you, Mr. and Ms. LinkedIn user. Glad to have you along. Certainly, there are going to be people and there are going to be organizations that have different maturity levels and how they coach coaching and where they are along in that process. But I certainly find there's some fundamentals there that in the sales management class that I teach, it's treating the other person as a human being, doing a lot of listening, focusing on behavior and inputs rather than the necessarily just the results or coaching to the forecast, the right cadence of doing those reviews. One of the things when I was researching for my book a few years ago, and we're particularly looking at that time millennials, and now millennials are kind of in charge of things. But what they were finding is that younger workers actually wanted more feedback, more direct and one-on-one feedback than would their older, more mature counterparts. And so I would not have the assumption that your direct reports or the people across your team don't want to be coached. In fact, they probably do, but in a certain way that recognizes them as human beings, as valuable performers, but actually feeds into the kinds of behaviors that they have and how they allocate their time accordingly. Again, it's kind of general, but I think we see too often that if people don't, as in that coaching role, if they're not quite sure what to do, they just kind of say, how's your forecast looking? Have you made 10 calls today? But not necessarily peeling back just a little bit and looking at the specifics of how they're prioritizing, how things are moving along, and specifically how that manager can help, not do it for them, but actually help them to develop those skills and that confidence over time.
Yeah, great question and great answer. So time flies when you're having fun here. So Tucker, maybe you can throw on the link for the Humantic tools. So thanks for Humantic for being the sponsor. So awesome personality profile information. And then if you want to join Sales Community, there's a free link there. And coming up, we have next week Rick Scurfield, who is the CRO at Vast Data, has a great topic, tips to be a better to work better cross-functionally and strategic thinking CRO. And then Vinay Nishani, who's VP Worldwide Software Sales at Cisco. The following week, then we skip for July 4th, Chris Scanlon, CRO of Human, and a lot of other great folks lined up. And Jim, you've been awesome. So great. Such an important topic. Look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Absolutely. Whether it's back down in T-Town or some other point along the way. I know you have community meetings and things all around, but this is it's tremendous, again, what you've curated here. And it's been a real pleasure, real honor to join this group.
Awesome. And actually, for those watching, we just decided yesterday I'm going to be in Nashville beginning next week, and we're doing a little meetup. I sent around on LinkedIn to some Nashville friends. I'm going to be there with Joey Gilkey from Apex Revenue doing some work. But anyway, so Jim, awesome. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much. Everybody have a great week.